Okay, we're gonna get this research started. So I guess the first question we can start with is what you found most helpful or valuable with your experience in the digital storytelling workshop.
My story, the only reason I remember it is because when I was a little girl, we had a radio program called Muckluck Telegraph. Seriously. And my mother, who was in the TB hospital, and my Aunt Teresa used to request the song, Good Night, Irene, for my sister. And I would remember my sister because I wasn't supposed to ask. They didn't slap me around or anything, but it was just so laden with sadness that she was in the TB hospital and probably wouldn't come back. And when my aunt and my mother would send the song to each other, I'd remember Irene, but I never talked to anybody about it. And when I was an adult, people told me that they didn't know I had a sister. Well, I had two sisters, excuse me. But it was so sad. It was so overladen with pain that I just couldn't talk about it. And then I realized that the pain eats away at yourself. And so what the digital storytelling did to me was it put the story outside of me. And that gives it a lot. It doesn't have the power over me the way it did. And so even if I cry when I watch it, it doesn't eat away at me, kind of like eroded my spirit or something like that. And I see a lot of hope and healing in the Native community from stories like these. There's such a variety, and we are some interesting people. And congratulations on planning to do your digital storytelling. This is the beginning, and it feels wonderful. It's the first time I've seen it on the big screen, and it's good to be with my Native family for that. Thank you.
Well said.
Well, for myself, I think the digital storytelling couldn't have came at a better time. The story of finding my lizard, like I had said in the story, I wasn't raised by my natural family, and it was really hard to keep it so brief, the story that I really wanted to tell, but I was taken away from very young parents, raised in a home, a native foster home here in the Bay Area. My mother took in children from American Indian Child Resource Center, and I was the first child that she took in. And I just met my real family last year, so all this happened last year. My sisters meeting my sisters finding me, meeting my father, meeting my mother again. And my family wasn't something that we really talked about. My mom did her best to raise me as her own, and for many reasons, protecting me, protecting herself, protecting our family unit, we didn't talk about it. A lot of my family to this day doesn't even know that my mom's not my real mother. So when this all came about, I was like, I have my sisters now, these sisters that nobody's gonna know where they came from. And how do I explain this to people? And for me, it was just the best way to release it all. And it felt good to tell it in a workshop with people I felt comfortable with, to a community that I felt comfortable with, and kind of just get it out. And it made it that much easier to have to tell my three younger nieces that, like, your grandma's not my real mother. I have another family out there somewhere. So, sorry. For me, it just released a lot of emotion in a very good way, in a very safe space, and it made it easier for me to have to tell, a lot of my family that may not have known this. I have an uncle that just came to visit 2 days ago, and he still didn't know. He couldn't figure out why I wasn't enrolled in the San Carlos Apache tribe. He was like, why are you not enrolled there? Uncle, because I'm not really Apache, I'm Wallapai. And now I'm going, it couldn't have came at a better time for me. It released a lot of things that I was holding inside. And my mother still hasn't seen this, and I'm hoping that one day I can get the courage to show it to her. But yeah, so it was a really good experience for me.
when I went in, I thought my story was going to be about what made people change. My family moved down here on relocation, and then I realized that had been a theme in my life about, why people make it and why people don't. And this story came out of me, and I remember after I recorded my narrative, I was crying. And I looked over at the facilitator and I thought, you're crying too, aren't you supposed to be facilitating? and I was shocked, and then we put it together, I put this thing together, and I kept being so surprised that this came out of me. And I think the thing that surprised me the most was that I had lived through it. And it was something that was like this in my life. And when I took it and looked at it, it shocked me. And I realized they had normalized getting up and walking this day. And I never realized what I had been carrying. And I watched that story after I made it for about a month every day and cried. Get up really early, and I'd watch it and I'd cry. And then I finally was able to watch it without tearing up. And so it's been a tremendous healing just to be able to let it go, that process of letting it go, and recognizing that it took a lot of strength, and recognizing a part of me that I had been almost denying, just not acknowledging of walking this path. And when I look out, I see a lot of Native people, a lot of communities of color that do that. We don't recognize the strength it takes to live our lives.
I think that for myself, telling my story, it's a story I tell pretty frequently. But when I think about our communities and the way that we learn as Native people, I grew up with stories, and our stories are, historically they're passed down through the oral tradition, and our elders tell us stories and our parents tell us stories as children, so we don't forget parts of our history and so that we know where we come from. And so for myself, telling my story was that part of that oral tradition. I tell it to other people, so that they'll learn from the things that I've been through, but I also tell it to myself. Every time I see that story, I'm telling a story to myself. I see that narrative, and I know where I came from, and that makes it easier to for me to find my way where I'm going, And so for me, that was the importance of telling that story. And even though that's only one, I think these stories are one facet in our lives, we're made up of so many different stories. I think each of us could go through, multiple digital storytelling workshops, and each time the story that came out is just going to be as beautiful and original and, poignant as the last story. And so that's what I think is really valuable about the digital storytelling workshops, is that it's not just one story, one individual, is just a multitude of different experiences, and getting to, create one with the Native American Health Center, it's just, it's been a really beautiful experience.
So what helped me in the process is that I, did the storytelling process with colleagues and with friends, and that was really helpful, especially with a story like that. And I think also just the patience of the people that I was working with, and then also just the way that we interweaved a lot of our own ways of holding each other was really helpful in the story. So it was great to have Martha as part of the process, because we did have prayer as a part of it. We had song and all of those sorts of things. And for stories as heavy as these, as intense, we can't hold it by ourselves, right? I mean, even though we have been. And in the work that I do with my clients, when we get to a space where they're telling their stories and it's bigger than the two of us sitting there. You know, we light some sage, or you know, sweetgrass, or anything else that they're comfortable lighting, and really that is just a part of like knowing that there's a greater presence or being that also is helping us hold the stories. And so I think in that way, at least for me, that allowed me to not only trust the people I was going through the process with, that they could hold the story, but that also there was a bigger presence that was holding those stories, and has always held those stories. The other thing this reminds me of also is when we were, I think it was debriefing and talking about beginning to engage our community with the digital storytelling. I was reminded of, you know, as Navajos, we're taught our creation stories, and then that we're taught that we're in this world that we're in. Interestingly enough, it's called the glittering world. And we've gone through different worlds before. So I just find it really fascinating and interesting that we are living in a world that is so shiny, like full of shiny objects, including stories that are on the screen, you know, computer screens, iPhones, those sorts of things. All these spaces where we're telling our story. And even with something as popular as Facebook, like people want to tell their story, you know, and they want to share that. As human beings, we're naturally social beings. We want to feel safe and belong. And I feel like that was the big thing that came out of the storytelling process, is that, you know, it sort of made it a full circle back there. And also to end with, don't ever give a Navajo money. That's what's going on here. But the other thing I want to end with actually is you're writing your dissertation, which is one Navajo that yeah, and I forgot what I was even going to say. So. I really did, yeah, I forgot. So maybe I'll come back to it later.
You want to go?
What I found most helpful about the digital story for me was that it was an opportunity to thank and be very grateful towards my parents. I think this is the way I compare it. You know how writers, they write books and in some way they mention or put in their relatives or their family, and they can identify themselves within those stories, and in some way they feel that they're connected to that person, or they feel that that person remembered them. So that's what I did. I felt like I was putting all the people that I was really grateful for, at least in that point in my life. There's other people that I probably didn't include because maybe at that point in time maybe they weren't present, but it was a way of being very thankful and grateful for all the people in my life, and happy to be alive as well. And my parents are a big part of that. So that's why I looked at the digital story as an opportunity, more than anything for me, to put my parents in there and just say thank you.
Last but not least.
I was really thankful to be part of the digital storytelling workshop this last time when I did this story for my mom. And I think what's funny about digital storytelling workshops is like some people, they come in, they're like, I'm going to tell this story and this is how I'm going to tell it. And by the time the first day is over, the story circle's over, they're like, I'm not telling that story, I'm telling a completely different one. And I think with like walking in and like being a part of the story circle, and telling your stories and sharing them with other people, but being very present for their stories and being able to share things that you never thought would come out of you, but come out of you, is really powerful. And I really loved what Martha had said about, like, we go around in our lives and we hold on to silence and we hold on to like tightly bound things inside. And I think it is within storytelling and actually having people listen, which doesn't happen. Like, we can go throughout our days and people just don't listen. And I think it's deeply moving to be surrounded by people who will listen but are looking at your hearts too. So it's with humility too that like all these people have come in and told their stories, even though it was maybe not the story they expected they were going to tell, and not the story, and maybe it wasn't the time before, but they've been given the time to do that. And I feel that digital storytelling is deeply powerful and deeply moving.
I think I already have my dissertation results done. It works. But thank you again for sharing your stories. It takes courage and strength. Maybe we get another round of applause.